Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I should start off by saying that I've always been a pragmatist on Europe and our membership of the EU. And so, from my perspective and my community, we wanted to see a practical way forward found following the referendum. But the deal that we're being asked to vote on, the Prime Minister's negotiated deal, whilst well-intentioned, is not a practical way forward for Britain. It means rules without say. Instead of taking back control, it gives away control. We'll have less say than now over the rules that shape our lives. Worse, not being around the table on setting rules that strategically in the future will matter to Britain. Rules that might disadvantage the city if designed the wrong way. Rules that might disadvantage British industry if designed the wrong way. We aren't taking back control, we are giving it away. And this sovereignty giveaway alone, from my perspective, is already making this deal unacceptable for Britain. And in fact, I find it impossible to see any future Parliament ever updating fresh rules set at the EU level, which we then have to commit to whether we like them or not. So this deal, in the end, will be shown to be inoperable. And the time that that's most likely to happen in Britain will be the time when we have a government with a low or even no majority, such as we have now. So this fragile and unstable withdrawal agreement and political agreement declaration will double up political instability and translate it then into economic instability too, making things worse. So the PM's deal is inoperable. I might welcome the government's assurances on EU workers. Many are in my own local community, but in practice this detail is only limited to the very short term, and my constituents, my businesses who come to my MP surgery want more than that. They want to know what happens beyond the so-called transition period. As others have said, it's disappointing that the government hasn't yet set out its immigration plans for the House to take in context for today's debate and next week's vote. This really matters to a very mixed community that I represent. They need clarity. On the Union, on Northern Ireland in particular, I'm greatly concerned about the undermining of the Good Friday Agreement by this deal and the weak approach by this government on the backstop. I'm concerned about the prospects for the re-emergence of a hard border in Northern Ireland, and that being the more of a challenge, the more we diverge on product standards and regulations. And I'm concerned about prospects for a Northern Ireland that risks being increasingly decoupled from the United Kingdom and how that can undermine the Union at the heart of the United Kingdom. And the economic projections, of course, I'm sure others will talk about this, on our economy, on jobs, are also hugely concerning. The open-ended and uncertain period covered by the withdrawal agreement leaves this country utterly exposed as a rule taker at the very moment we face global economic uncertainty and an increased push for protectionism. And in relation to state aid, for example, during that period, the EU itself can decide if we're breaking the rules, they can decide whether and how much we should be fined, and then they can decide whether we've complied. It will be the judge and jury. That's what we're being asked to support with this withdrawal agreement, and I can't accept this. The timescale it covers, as my honourable friend, the member for East Surrey, has compellingly set out, is hugely likely to be extended. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm grateful to the honourable lady. The point she's making about rule-taking and sovereignty is absolutely right. Does she agree with me that the reason we've got into this position is because the whole Brexit debate has defined sovereignty as being purely about immigration and the movement of people and not at all about the rules which govern our economy?
Absolutely.
I think people are certainly much more familiar now about the trade-offs that are involved in relation to Brexit, and I'll come back to that later on. And of course, this thing is called a transition period, it's called an implementation period, but to what? The bottom line is, all we've got on our destination is 26 pages of something called a political agreement. It's not binding, there's no detail, no guarantees, no timescales, and if this was anything else comparable, for example, a big infrastructure project, we'd have a national policy statement. It might be 1,000 pages of detail for the House to consider. Here we've got just 26 pages. A proposed deal on leaving the European Union is perhaps the ultimate national policy statement, yet we've virtually nothing. It's the political equivalent of being asked to jump out of a plane without knowing if your parachute is there and attached. It's like agreeing to move out of your house without knowing where you're going to live next, or not even having agreed the sales price, but selling out and signing the contract anyway. None of us would do this in our own lives, yet this withdrawal agreement and political declaration asks us to do it on behalf of our country. Overwhelmingly, my community does not support it, and I will not therefore be able to back this deal. So there are practical problems, there are sovereignty problems, but I think there are democratic problems too, because this Brexit deal is not the Brexit that Leave campaigners campaigned for, and it is not the Brexit that Leave voters voted for. It is not delivering on the result of the 2016 referendum. Leavers in my own community reject it. I've had hundreds of emails and letters on this. Remainers reject it. They're left thinking, what's the point if Leavers are not happy with the outcome of the referendum where they won? What is the point of leaving to simply have all the same EU rules anyway? And forcing the PM's deal through when it is so universally unpopular will do nothing to heal the divisions in our country. And in fact, it's worse. It's kicking the can down the road, exactly what the public expects politicians to do. It's a short-term political fix at the very time we desperately needed a long-term plan, and people deserve better. That's why they're so frustrated. Brexit has turned into a pantomime. It feels like Groundhog Day, and it is gridlock in Parliament. We have been talking about Brexit now for years, and I think we all need to recognise that government ministers, frontbenchers and MPs will vote, of course, the way that they think is right. And I hope the government does consider a free vote on the government benches, because we do all represent very different communities with very different views. But free votes or no free votes, I believe it's clear that there'll be no majority in this House for any Brexit route forward. Not for the PM's deal, not for Labour's ever opaque deal, whatever that may be, not for no deal, no majority for anything. And yet we've got to bring this to a resolution. We can't keep going round in circles forever. We've got to solve Brexit so that we can get on to solving some of the issues that lie behind Brexit. And this Parliament now needs to take the steps to allow us to get back onto a domestic agenda as the public wants. Now, some on the opposite benches might say, let's have a general election, but that solves nothing, because Brexit is not about party politics. It's why this House has had so many challenges grappling with Brexit-related legislation. So this place is gridlocked, and giving a party political question to people on a question that's not about party politics won't work. And Labour is just putting its own narrow party political interests ahead of the country's vital need to resolve a path forward on Brexit. And I know that the route forward left might be unpalatable to many, including Labour and Conservative frontbenchers, but it may be the only viable route out of Parliament's gridlock. And that's to do what we always end up doing in a democracy, asking the people. And you can do a referendum, Mr. Speaker, in 22 weeks. We could hold it on the 30th of May. It could be a referendum. I will give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. She spoke about the importance of healing divisions, and many of my constituents are very concerned that a second referendum would actually make those divisions worse. What does she say to them?
Well, I don't think you heal divisions by pretending they're not there. And I certainly don't think it's democratically justifiable for this government to ram through a version of Brexit that is not what people who voted for Brexit want. That, we have to agree, cannot be acceptable. But if you then combine that with the fact that this House will be gridlocked on all the options, and that's just the practical reality, then we have to find another route forward. I, for one, would argue that a referendum is one of the ways that we could enable millions of Leave voters who don't think that this government's delivering on the verdict of that referendum a chance to have their say properly in a way that they don't think is happening in this Parliament. And we now have some clear-cut, practical choices, and we should put those on the table for people to choose. Those are, I will make some progress given the time. Those are the options on offer for Britain: the Prime Minister's deal, staying on our existing term, or, of course, having a cleaner break, leaving on WTO rules, but then having a free trade agreement after. I think this House should have the confidence to put those clear, practical options that we now face back to the people, and that's why I believe we should have a people's vote. This deal has united people in opposition to it. Nobody gets what they want. That's not compromise. Opposition on all fronts to the Prime Minister's deal isn't a virtue. It's the opposite. It's going in exactly the wrong way, and it will take us back to square one. I believe that we owe future generations, given that this deal is irreversible if we vote it through, we owe them the chance to make sure that this House didn't hope that we were taking the right route forward on Brexit. We knew we were taking the right route forward on Brexit, and that means asking them for their view.